Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto and in this video I'll take a look at this Lumix 20mm f1.7 prime lens. This 20mm is either a moderate wide angle or a slightly wide standard lens, whichever way you want to put it. Together with this 45mm f2.8 macro lens, these two lenses were the very first prime lenses in the mirrorless Lumix lineup in 2009. And this 20mm is the Mark II version that came out in 2013. The main difference between this and the Mark I is that the exterior is metal in this Mark II version. I used to own the Mark I version, and as far as I remember, it wasn't like a cheap feeling lens either, but of course the metal outer case or whatever you call it in this Mark II version feels even better than the Mark I. The optical construction is the same and the optical performance is also the same on both lenses. There are three very tiny wide-angle lenses in the Lumix lineup. The 14mm f2.5, the Leica 15mm f1.7 and then the 20mm f1.7. All these lenses are tiny, but they have slightly different character and suitable for maybe slightly different shooting situations. I have a separate video on the 14mm and the 15mm, but if you'd like me to do a comparison between all these three lenses, please let me know in the comments down below and I'd be happy to do that if you are interested. The build quality of this lens is very decent indeed. The exterior is metal and the only moving part is the focusing ring, and there is no room for any other moving parts really because this lens is tiny. This lens weighs in at about 90 grams and the filter size is 46mm. This particular lens looks a bit odd though because somebody who was using the lens before me decided to screw on a step-up ring, and the step-up ring is so tightly screwed on that I can't remove it, and I'm afraid I'll break something if I try really hard. And this is not my lens, this is on loan from Focus Nordic Finland. They are the official Lumix importer here in Finland. Unfortunately, there is no lens hood with this lens, and as far as I know, Panasonic doesn't make a hood for this lens. However, I'm pretty sure there are some third-party alternatives, and I'm a big proponent of lens hoods, so I would recommend always to get a lens hood for every lens, and you wouldn't need a big lens hood for a tiny lens like this. And because the lens is so tiny, it feels well balanced pretty much on every Micro Four Thirds camera body, even on the very small camera bodies. But on something like the G9, which is one of the bigger Micro Four Thirds cameras, it feels almost like there's no lens at all in a good way, that is. The optical construction of this lens is quite simple by today's standards. There are only 7 elements in 5 groups, and that includes 2 aspherical elements. And the minimum focusing distance is 20 centimeters, which is quite normal for a lens like this, and this lens doesn't have any special close-up capabilities. And there's no optical image stabilizer built into this lens, but as we all know, most Lumix cameras have a really good in-body stabilizer, and because this is a wide-angle lens, there is really no need for an optical stabilizer on a lens like this. You can easily handhold fairly long shutter speeds using just the Lumix camera with in-body stabilizer. But now I'd like to show you some photos that I shot on this lens, but I decided to include also some older pictures that I shot a few years ago on a similar lens, and there's even one picture shot on the Mark I lens, because the weather over here in Helsinki has been really overcast and cloudy lately again, so I wanted to include some sunny pictures too. But let's take a look. Please also consider to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so, and also sign up for my monthly newsletter. There's a link in the description, but you can also go to my website sulanto.fi. And now let's look at the optical performance of this lens, which is very good indeed. The mid part of the frame is sharp, already wide open, and stays that way until about f8. After which the diffraction starts to soften the image, but if you really need all that depth of field, f11 is still very usable, but I would avoid f16 if possible. And the best uniform sharpness across the frame comes between f2.8 and f8. And I really like the way this lens renders wide open. I like it that the contrast and sharpness fades slightly towards the edges or corners of the frame. I just like it. Naturally, there is some vignetting wide open, but it pretty much goes away when you stop down to about f2.8. I don't mind about that. I like some vignetting, but I know there are a lot of people out there who are very sensitive to vignetting, and if you are one of those, just stop down to about f2.8 or f4 and you are good to go. Whenever people talk about this lens, they say that the autofocus is really slow. And it's true that the autofocus is slower than on most Micro Four Thirds lenses, especially some of the current lenses, some of the very new lenses. But I wouldn't say it's hopelessly slow. It's fast enough for everything I shoot for myself. And if you feel that you are missing a lot of decisive moments, I think it might also be that you are not well prepared. I mean, if you see that something's happening right there, right now, you're already too late. You have to somehow be able to predict that something is going to happen. Let's say, for example, that there's a red door and you see somebody wearing red coming closer to the door. Of course, you prepare yourself, you compose and focus and check your exposure and everything, and then when the red wearing person walks into your frame, then you snap the picture. But if you see that red wearing person by the door, walking by the door, then you're late already. Do you own this 20mm f1.7? Or have you used it extensively? I'd like to know how you find the lens and in what kind of photography you are using it, and is it your favorite lens? Please let me know in the comments down below. All in all, I would say this is a great general purpose lens, and I could imagine using only this lens pretty much for the rest of my life. It's not quite my perfect dream lens, but it's close enough for everything I shoot for myself. It's compact, it's sharp, and it's well built. There are a couple of minor downsides though. It's not weather sealed and the autofocus is on the slow side. The autofocus, like I said before, doesn't matter to me. It's fast enough for everything I do, but however it still is slower than on most current lenses. The price of this lens seems to be here in Europe around 350 euros, but in the United States it seems to be well under $300. And I'm not quite sure why it's so much more expensive here in Europe, but the prices over here include the sales tax or VAT, which is quite high compared to the United States. In most European countries it's between 20 and 25%. Thanks so much for watching and keep your Lumix cameras active, and I'll see you in the next one.